Hello everybody, it's Zoe from How to Make a Lemonade Life. Today's video recording is my story and I tell it to you with a little bit of trepidation and a little bit of excitement as well. I'm pleased to get the story out there and let you know what my lemonade life came from. So let's go back in time, about 20 years. Is it 20 years? Yeah, it is roughly 20 years ago now. And I was sitting in my car on the beach. Now where I live, which is it's kind of like at the seaside, but at the same time it's more of where there's a meeting of two estuaries. But we face Ireland, and I was sitting in my car on this day facing Ireland, and I was contemplating about how far I would have to drive the car until the car got stuck. Now you understand I didn't want to get to Ireland. Not that I've got anything against the Irish, but no, I didn't want to get to Ireland. I genuinely wanted to get stuck. But I didn't want the car to get stuck too soon, because if it got stuck too soon, then obviously somebody could rescue me quite easily. I wanted the car to get stuck so that nobody could rescue me. But you know, it took me so long to work that out. Half an hour later, I had a tear-stained face, tears all coming down my cheeks, and I just felt like I was a failure. I felt like I was a failure because here we had something else that I'd managed not to do right. I couldn't even take my own life right. So got the car turned around, went back onto the roadway and drove home. And at that moment I became the world's best wallpaper of life you can find. I plastered on that smile and everybody thought that my life was okay. You see, I was somebody who people always described as having been born with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I guess they were right in some ways. I am somebody who's always had a lot of luck in my life. But the trouble with that is when you're somebody that people think everything goes well for you, when things are going badly, because you're the kind of person like I was, like I still am, where I will laugh things off, nobody believes you when they're crying out, "Help, help." So I cried out help. I went to my doctor. He prescribed me a walk on the beach. Don't think he was quite listening to where I tried to take my life. I also went and spoke to the health visitor, and her answer to me was, "Yeah, lots of people feel like that." I don't think she quite heard my message that I'd been trying to take my life. So there I was, stuck feeling that nobody was listening to me, and I felt as though I'd gone from being somebody to nobody. In my job, I was the youngest director in a university, and so in my job I was a senior manager at the age of, I think I was 29, and at that age I was then going around the country. I was speaking at events. I was invited to go and help other organisations do what I was doing in the organisation I worked in, and I was known nationally for the work that I was doing on leadership development, on management development, on change management within universities. And this was an important time for universities as well, because they were going from being polytechnics to being universities. There was a new intake of universities. So as a result, I was somebody in the university sector. At that time, I chose to leave working for an employer and decided to work for myself. And I became nobody. Nobody knew me. I sat for weeks on end and the phone didn't ring. It's amazing how that happens when you don't speak to anybody. And the phone calls I was making, cold calling, nothing was happening because I was believing nothing would happen. I actually believed that I wasn't going to get anywhere. Wow, it's amazing being able to prove yourself right, isn't it? And then in my family life, my sister was diagnosed with a brain tumour. And so my parents were putting a lot of energy and attention into looking after her and helping her with her life. And not necessarily doing it right, but as a result, they were cutting me out and they didn't realise they were cutting me out. So I went from being my parents' little angel, my dad's princess, to being nobody there as well because I didn't have a brain tumour. I don't think I ever told my sister about how I felt like I was pushed out. But thankfully, we did have many more years of her being around. And then there was my life with my husband. I'd been the apple of his eye. I was the love of his life. And then I became the other woman. We had a daughter, and he fell head over heels in love with her. And in falling head over heels in love with her, he pushed me out. He didn't really realise what he was doing in pushing me out, but he had no time for anybody else other than her. So I went from being somebody to nobody. I think I was also suffering from postnatal depression. I was never actually diagnosed with it. But when I look back now, I realise that I was one of those people who I didn't have it badly enough for anybody to take notice of what was going on for me. But I was definitely depressed, and I definitely reached the point where I wanted to take my own life. So I started to have to work on things in my own life myself. And that's where I created How to Make a Lemonade Life. I didn't know that that's what it was at that time. It's not until I came out the other side that I knew that what I'd created for myself was a lemonade life. But I created something for myself by changing things around. And for many, many years, I didn't tell anybody that's what I was doing for myself. You see, what caused the problems for me in my life was something that happened when I was about 4 or 5 years old. As a little girl, I remember telling some neighbours something. I actually can't remember what that something was. I've tried to remember. It might have been something to do with a change of job one of my parents had, or maybe it was a holiday we were going on, or it could have even been about having bought a TV. I have no idea now what it was. The neighbours obviously spoke to my parents and mentioned what I'd said, and I got a telling off. We don't share what's going on in our lives with other people. You don't tell people our business. You don't tell people our business. I can't remember how many times I've been told that. You don't tell people our business. And so as a result, I developed this whole pretense. I became the chatty kid. I became the child who I would just talk about myself and talk. If I talked for long enough, nobody could get a word in edgeways. And if they couldn't get a word in edgeways, they wouldn't ask me about what was going on in our family. So I would talk about inane drivel, just so that it didn't give people the space to ask me questions. Because you see, at a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, you don't know that you need strategies to stop things happening. And I didn't have a strategy to say, I don't need to answer your question. I didn't have a strategy for not telling people things that my parents had told me. I didn't know how to handle that. So as a result, I developed my own version of strategies, which became the thing that I think was my downfall. I was the person who worked on making people laugh. I have done stand-up comedy, by the way. Not brilliantly, but I've done it. And I've done a lot of things in my life where I've been the card. I've been the one who makes people have a giggle about things. I'll take the mickey out of myself first before other people get the chance to do it for me. And the whole point behind that is that it's about me controlling the situation. Now then, that's where the problems then came from. Me controlling the situation. Have you ever noticed you can't control everything? I certainly found that out through living the life I was living, trying to control what people would ask me and how I could stop them asking the questions that I didn't want to answer. People often think they know me really well, but they only know the bits that I allow them to know because of that learned behaviour that I'm not going to share all my information. So sharing my story here is quite a tough one. So it started, as I said, with me on the beach, contemplating taking my own life. It started with the realisation that I'd gone from being somebody to nobody. And it started with me being a bit pragmatic, I guess, because I sat on a log at Formby Point and I wrote down a list of what were the good things about taking my own life and what were the bad things. One of the bad things I came up with, if I drove into the sea and took my own life, then salty water would get in through the exhaust and then my husband wouldn't be able to use the car again. I have a feeling he probably wouldn't have wanted to use the car I'd killed myself in. But I was more worried about the fact that the salt water would get into the exhaust and would damage the engine. So my pros and cons list actually helped me to realise that I would stay alive. But one of the things I decided I would do was ask for a divorce. And I did. Now my husband reluctantly agreed and then told me that he would fight me in court for our daughter. And one of his reasons that he believed he would win was because I was doing a job where I was travelling literally from one end of the country to another. And the phone doesn't ring for hours. And then when you're recording, you can almost guarantee that's when the phone's going to start trying to ring on you. So my husband decided he would fight in court because I was away for weeks on end, working away. I'd come home for weekends and that would be about all I'd be home for. Saturday night sometimes was all I'd be home for. and he believed a judge would find in his favour. So I decided to stay in the marriage and that I would fight for the marriage. And boy, it was a fight. I also eventually went back to work for an employer, partly because of some of the things that I had to do to look after my daughter with her learning difficulties, and partly because I wanted to make sure that I made the marriage work and thought that was a good way of doing it. Everything I did in my life at that point in my life was working against my true self. And in my last corporate job, I had one accident after another. I tore a calf muscle, and I tore it right across. I had hold of a cup of tea in my hand, and I did this fabulous flip with my hand. Now, the cup of tea was boiling hot water that had just come out the kettle. I don't have milk in my tea, so this flip with the hand poured boiling hot water all over my hand, and I had to go to the burns clinic, which happened to be just across from where I worked. I also managed to damage some ligaments in my thumb. That was painful enough, didn't take much notice of that. I then damaged them again 4 weeks later. They snapped off my thumb and snapped back and damaged my carpal tunnel, so I ended up having a carpal tunnel operation. I broke a big toe on one foot, and then 6 weeks later I broke a little toe on the other foot. Do you know what? The list goes on of the number of accidents that I had. By the way, I was working for a hospital, a large hospital, so that's where the burns clinic was. And when I had the hand problems, that was the hand clinic I had to go to. All these specialists literally just around me. And so I was in the right place to get the support, but I wasn't listening to what was going on, which was you're in the wrong job at the wrong place in your life just now. So eventually I listened and I walked out on my job. My boss used the F word against me, having had 4 years of her using the F word throughout 1-hour meetings twice a week and finishing off her meetings telling me not to swear at the effing staff. Actually, it was not to effing swear at the effing staff. And then she would carry on with what I was effing not to effing do. And so this one day I snapped and I walked out. Now you'd think that would be the proper start, the true start of the Lemonade life. But no. I did a runaway job. And it wasn't until I realised that it was a runaway job and I truly started to make the changes that everything I was doing from that day on was about having a Lemonade life. Now the exercises that I use in Lemonade life, they're exercises I've used to get me out of depression. They're exercises I've used to stop me taking my life. They're exercises I've used that when I've over-worried about things, I could deal with those worries. They're exercises I've used to help me deal with my relationship issues with my husband, with my sister, believe it or not, being jealous that she had a brain tumour and was getting all the attention in the family. I've used the exercises to deal with my issues with my parents. All the issues that I have carried with me. And I know I was carrying these issues with me. How do I know? I was somebody who suffered with chronic migraine. Now that means every day I got up with a migraine and I had to go to work with a migraine every single day. The day I made the decision I was changing my life was the last day I had a full-blown migraine. I stopped having to take drugs that were going to create ulcers in my stomach. I stopped having to take drugs that were addictive. I stopped having to take drugs that could bring on depression. And I took control of my life. And from that day on, I've been having a Lemonade life. I'm going to be sharing more with you as time goes on, but I hope that gives you a snapshot of my life and how I know that How to Make a Lemonade Life genuinely does make a difference. It's made a huge difference for me. I have challenged myself, I've pushed my boundaries, I've done things I don't want to do, like looking inside of myself. I've forgiven people that I've not believed they've needed to be forgiven, but I've forgiven them because really, ultimately, what I needed to do was forgive myself. And I've turned my life around and I live the life of my dreams with freedom from all the pressures that I put onto myself. So as I say, I hope that gives you a little snapshot of who I am and what I've done. And I hope through it you can start finding your Lemonade life and make a difference for you too. So thanks very much for joining me for this story and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.